Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Before we get started, I would just like to check that everyone can hear me clearly and that everyone can see the presentation on your screen. If you can't or if you have difficulty, please use the chat box to let us know. You have joined this presentation listening using your computer's speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the telephone, just select Use Telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. For better audio quality, everyone but the speaker has been put on mute. This webinar is being recorded and that will be sent to you, so you'll have a copy of both the slides, the presentations you can see, and the audio that we're giving now, as well as the questions. Questions are welcome throughout the webinar. What you should do is in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a question box. If you maximize that with the little plus, you can write in the questions throughout the webinar, but after the main presentation, then it will be the Q&A session, then we'll move on to answering the actual questions. So what I suggest you do now is maximize the presentation screen, turn up your volume, and we're going to begin.
Welcome everybody to this webinar. My name is Norena Voigtveld. I'm Investment Coordinator at the British Embassy in Paris within the UKTI France team. I'm here today with my colleague Sophie de Bodisco, who is Head of Consumer, Creative and Services team. Also with us today, our partner to this event, Finance Innovation, represented by Mrs. Joëlle Durieux, Managing Director. And we also have our guest speakers, Mr. Stéphane Hérault, CEO of Shapley Alder, and Mr. James Dickerson, Program Director of Accenture Fintech Innovation Lab. So over the next few minutes, we'll be taking you through this webinar on fintech markets. So you will hear about the current and future trends from each our specialists. We'll look at business opportunities that are available at the moment, and then there will be a chance for Q&A at the end.
Good morning, everyone. This is Sophie de Bodisco. I'm Head of Consumer Services and Creative Team in Paris. Our webinar today is about fintech, but I would like to introduce you to UKTI for those of you who never heard of UKTI before. So UKTI is the government department that helps UK-based companies succeed actually in France for us. And also we do encourage foreign companies, and in this case, the French companies, invest in the UK. So I'll be taking care of British companies interested in developing their business in France, and Norena is helping French companies interested in investing in the UK. On the trade side, we do help British companies with market research and identifying the right contacts for them should they want to develop their business. We also assist them at trade events. UK companies have the chance to hire some of the certain embassy facilities if they want to do a launch, a presentation, invite prospect and organize a cocktail. We do also publicize business opportunities, meaning that if we have a French company looking for British suppliers, we will advertise that on the UKTI website and British companies can reply to those opportunities, and then we will introduce British companies to French companies. Thank you very much. Norena?
From the investment side, we'll support any endeavor. We'll provide customized, confidential, and free information should you want to set up or expand your business in the UK. So we'll help you to search for the best location. We'll connect you with a professional, key contacts, association. We'll also provide information on R&D, tax, human capital, incentive, visa, and also help you should you want to recruit staff locally.
I'd like to introduce you to Joëlle Durieux, who is the Managing Director of Finance Innovation, who is our partner for today. Joëlle?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here online. This is Joël Durieux, Managing Director of Finance Innovation, the Paris-based financial cluster. It gathers large corporate, labs, and fintech. As you know, the world is changing at a very fast pace, and the financial world has become more constraining. There are less investments in risky assets and in the real economy. At the same time, there are more and more entrepreneurs, and people expect more transparency and more personalized, user-friendly financial products and services. So, in our financial cluster, we have 300 financial members distributed in 6 major areas, which are banking, insurance, asset management, real estate, social economy, consulting and accounting. Our role is to scan various innovative projects before certifying the most innovative, bankable, and job-creating ones. Since the creation of Finance Innovation, we have certified 500 projects. These projects include various finance sectors, such as regulatory, digital transformation, risk management, and social issues. Our aim is to promote fintechs in order that they create jobs in France and abroad. How we do this? We bring financial corporates and SMEs together to collaborate on projects dealing with strategic challenges. For example, payments, crowdfunding, big data, blockchain, personal financial management, robot advisor, financial analyst, artificial intelligence. By the way, in few hours, we can see the match between Google's AlphaGo and the legendary Lee Sedol. It is important to note that compared to the UK, France is a major R&D talent pool, and there is a large number of highly skilled data scientists and engineers due to the highly specialized education in the early mentioned fields. In conclusion, I would like to say that over the next months, we'll focus on creating the investment committee, which will enable SMEs and fintechs to be funded in France, the UK, and internationally. Thank you very much for your undivided attention.
Thank you, Joël. I'd like now to start a presentation on FinTech in France, who will be actually presented by Stéphane Hérault from Chapuis Alder, CEO. Stéphane, I'll let you start the presentation and give you control of the screen.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to participate to this webinar. The aim of my presentation would be to give you the flavor of what are the FinTech paradigm now in France. So I'm trying to move the slide. Okay, so let's start by an overview and some key messages about the French ecosystem in terms of fintech. So compared to the US and the UK market, of course, the French market is still a challenger, but there is a lot of strength that could be very important for the next decade for the French fintech. We have first, we have a very valuable individual, like people like Renaud Laplanche from the Orphan Club or Stéphane Dubois. You have heard seen it. Unfortunately, most of them moved abroad to develop their fintech. So one of the key challenges for the fintech location in Paris would be to be able to retain their talent. It's going to be the key challenge. We have also some very nice success stories like Prêt d'Union or SlimPay. SlimPay has been mentioned by KPMG as one of the most innovative and most dynamic fintech in 2015. So it's quite a success, even if we are a bit disappointed to see that just one French fintech in the top 100. The third point, sorry, would be that we believe that the French ecosystem is getting stronger and stronger. thanks to, of course, initiatives like France Innovation, but also thanks to tax incentive and the involvement of new players in terms of financing or in terms of incubator, accelerator. So I think France is building a very robust and very comprehensive ecosystem, and that's a very good thing for the future. So the question for the next year, and we try to give you some ideas about that. The question would be: do the French would be able to retain its talents for the next couple of years, and make France as a key competitor for US and UK? That's a question. So if we move now to the next slide, it's just an overview of the key fintech in France by let's say industry or streams. As you could see, there is many very dynamic fintech in France. The interesting thing is that we are, and we will develop this idea a bit later in the presentation, but we are the first wave of fintech in France, mainly focused on the payment because we have these skills and this credential in France. And now we are moving more on a specific topic like algo trading, blockchain, or like other solution, investment solution like robot advisor. So that's we believe that it's the new levels in terms of growth for the French fintech, and that's a key trend of the market. So now, if you on the next slide, if you just have a look on the ecosystem, an overview of the ecosystem. So we have, of course, a strong involvement of institutions like, of course, Finance Innovation. It's a strong player and very helpful to help the ecosystem. We also have an association called France Fintech, which promotes the fintech and organize events around the fintech in France. That's very important. We also, as I already say, very strong personality with people very successful in the field of fintech, like, as I said, Stella Planche or the CEO of Zenith, Mr. Dubois. They are very important, I think, in the trend of the market because they give a dynamic for the French fintech. So in terms of banks involvement, they are quite good, especially banks like Crédit Mutuel, who is quite active in terms of funding and investment in fintech. They took part of Litchi, of course, or Your Money. Your Money is an investment solution based on robo-advisor and machine learning. And the last building block would be more about the financing of banks and taxes. So there is many tax incentive in France, even if with that we need to convince the investor, and especially the foreign investor, that the tax environment in France is now stable. That's very important, I think, but still there is a good start with very interesting tax incentive. We had the creation of incubator, accelerator labs in France, especially with the initiative of guys like Xavier Niels or Truffle Capital. And in terms of financing, we have many funds like Razeo, for example, or some business angels who sustain the growth of the fintech. So if we have just wanted to sum up a little bit the trends, so I would say there is 4 key trends in the market. I just see 3 on my slide, but I believe there are 3. So the first, I think that's important, and already mentioned, the ecosystem is getting stronger and stronger thanks to the key player in terms of incubator, financing, and research also. That's very important. We believe that the ecosystem is very dynamic because we have this new trend around the blockchain, the cryptocurrency, algorithm, machine learning. It's obviously based on our ability and capabilities around math, statistics, and actuarial. We have a very strong engineer. We have been very successful in the trading or in the private banking in the near past, and now we are moving to those talents are moving to fintech to try to disrupt a little bit the financial services, and that's why we have this emergence of that second wave. And even if it's still a bit low, I think we are seeing an acceleration of the investment in the French fintech. As I said, we have many players in terms of financing. I mentioned Razeo, but many people like Truffle Capital are part of that movement and are willing to invest a lot in the French fintech. And once again, I think for the investor, the key point would be to be sure that the tax environment would be stable for the next couple of years. So now it's more in detail the ecosystem, the first pillar of the French paradigm. So the ecosystem is basically based on three key streams. The first one is what we call the French tech. So the French tech is not only the fintech, but also all the startup in technology. So we have seen a clear dynamic in terms of accelerator, incubator creation, but also mentoring. More and more people in the banks or in the insurance company in the consulting firm are involved in the mentoring of the fintech, and I think it's very helpful to make sure that they are all the keys to develop and build the strategic plan. So that's very important. In terms of regulation, the second stream, some very interesting initiative has been done. In terms of tax, so there is a lot of savings, a lot of incentive around social charges yourself with a scheme like Jeune Entreprise Innovante or Crédit Impôt Recherche. It's good, very good sign that the government is pushing the innovation like a key lever of the future growth of the French market. That's very important. In terms of financing, we have also BPI Fund, which is a national bank who helps the startup to finance the project. They also guarantee with other banks the financing for the startup. So this role is very important. And of course, last but not least, the last stream would be around the education. As everybody knows, we are very strong in math, in statistics, in actuarial. So we have this population of young graduates, very good, very skilled, and very dynamic, and very happy to be involved in adventure like creating or developing a fintech. So that's very important to have this kind of population to feed the energy and the dynamic of the ecosystem. Oops, sorry. So if we now look at the new trend in the fintech, so as I said, after first wave focus around the payment, we move now to new topics, very hot topics like blockchain, and you all know that there is a lot of initiative in London, like R3 around the blockchain, and the blockchain is one hot topic of the financial services, and there is a lot of fintech around that technology, not only for the currencies like Bitcoin, but also for new applications like, for example, we are mentoring a fintech who use the blockchain to tackle the KYC process for banks, which is as you may know, very painful. So clearly, the blockchain is a hot topic, and we have this very good positioning in France because we have always been quite good in terms of security, cyber security. We should all remember that we have been initiative of with Gen Plus of the credit card, the security in the credit card. So we have a background in terms of security, and I think once again, based on our capabilities in math and statistics, we will be able to be in the leading pack for this kind of fintech. Algorithm machine learning, robot advisor, it's a key trend of the fintech everywhere, not only in France. Of course, we see a lot of fintech who try to push direct market access, especially for private banks, in order to give to the customer the ability to structure a very sophisticated strategy for trading or to build their portfolios, their asset portfolios. So, of course, as you know, we had a lot of French traders. Sometimes they were not traders, but many were good guys, and they are very skilled. And now they move to this part of the economy, and they are key players to ensure the success of fintech around algorithm machine learning. It's very important. So Yomoni is a good example. She has now Credit Mutuel on his board, and I think it's a very dynamic and very promising fintech. So this slide is more about what can happen for the next year. It's a conviction. It's not a fact. So of course we could discuss about that, but we strongly believe that in the top 3 of the key location for fintech, it's an objective clearly achievable, and due to all the elements we already mentioned. I think France is widely known for the quality of its mathematics, statistics, and science school, and we have already had very successful traders, as I said, and I think now for new segment of the market, like machine learning or algo trading, we will be on the ahead from the competition, and I think it's a very interesting trend for the French market. I think we also have a more favorable context for entrepreneur and investor in France due to, as I said, tax incentive like Crédit Impôt Cher or Jeune Entreprise Innovante. For the investor in France, we also have a scheme like PERP who give you some tax incentives. So I think the trend is good. Maybe we need to reinforce this trend in order to convince foreign investors that they could benefit a quite stable environment in terms of tax, because of course it's key when you calculate an ROI. You want to be sure that the environment in the next couple of years would be stable. So I think it's very important, and we need to carry on that topic. We had also some very interesting move from the government. For example, I would take the example of the crowdfunding. If you look at the FC or the PS, they clearly say that they try to balance the rules between the regulation and the innovation. They want to regulate, but they also want to foster the innovation. That's not really the case in Europe, continental Europe, when you look at the EBA regulation. But now for the crowdfunding, for example, I think the ACPR, the French regulator, made a good move by putting in place a lighter license for crowdfunding, and that's a good that's a good sign for the investor and for the entrepreneur. The last point is the investment. There is good sign. For example, Trade Union made a heavy of 30 million, so that's good. That means that there is investor. There is a will from people like Roseo or other funds to invest in the long run in the fintech. but still we need to demonstrate that Paris and not only Paris but France overall is a good place to invest, and I think we need to carry on and demonstrate that in the near future. So the rest of the presentation is more focused on 4 success stories, 2 on the payment and 1 on algorithm, and the last one is very well known on the data cloud, big data for the financial market. So I don't want to spend too much time on that because I think I'm more or less about 20 minutes. So Litchi is a very well known success story. Has been booked now by Crédit Mutuel Acquéa. That's a group of payment that allow users to collect and manage money for group events like birthday or farewell, this kind of stuff. So it's quite successful with something like I don't remember the number of users, but it's quite big. It's 4 million for each, I think. And MangoPay, it's more a platform between commercial and the individual. So that's quite good. As I said, it's based on payment, and it was created the first wave of the fintech. Lemonway is also on the payment, and but it based on the mobile phone for e-commerce, ticketing website, individual paying for services like some individual services. It's also a key success. Founded in 2007. With now revenue around 1 million, it's also a success story. And to illustrate it a bit, like I said, so the 2 last examples are more on the new trends of the market. The first is OneNet. So OneNet, it's a technology based on machine learning. So it's the ability to increase the efficiency of the machine on a daily basis. That's a very interesting solution to provide to individuals. So in the B2C model, the ability to develop quite sophisticated strategy. So it's also very interesting for the private bank because with this kind of solution, you develop the self-care. So of course you reduce the number of people in the client management team. So it's a good way to save some money for the banks. And the last one is Zenith. Zenith is big data. It's a big data fintech, clearly based on and focused on the financial data. So it's very interesting because it provides solution for investor, could be banks or individual, to have deep analysis of the market, to build hypotheses or scenarios for the market. So it's very smart. It's a very smart fintech. It's not really French, but the CEO and the founder is French, and it's supported by banks like Natixis or BlackRock for the funds. So it's also very successful. So that's the end of my presentation. We just started to the last slide on what we do. So I just want to say a word. So we are deeply involved in the fintech market, both in London and Paris, but also in Asia and in North America through our collaboration with Finance Innovation, with also Smarter Bootcamp. So we help the fintech to deliver the strategic plan, to build first and deliver the strategic plan. So that's a very important topic for us, and we strongly believe that thanks to initiative like Finance Innovation or this kind of player, we could believe in the bright future for the French fintech market. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for that, Stéphane. And just a reminder to everyone listening as well, you will receive a copy of all the slides as well as all our contact details after this. And now we're going to hand over to James D. Dickerson from UK company Accenture. James, over to you.
Thank you, and good morning or good afternoon, everybody. My name is James Dickerson. I'm the program director for the Fintech Innovation Lab here in London, which is an early stage accelerator program aimed at bridging the gap between large corporate banks and early stage fintech and technology companies. I'm going to use this session to give you kind of a high-level overview of the way in which we see the market based on what we're doing here on the ground in London, the self-proclaimed fintech capital of the world, and then introduce a little bit of a London spin on some of the slides, and also talk a little bit about our program that we run here in Level 39. Open. Flying through the slides. Okay, so just a little bit on the evolution of the word fintech. I mean, this is not something that we see as new. Fintech has been around since the 1950s, 1960s, with the original kind of COBOL mainframes that many of the bank platforms are still built upon today. What we have seen is an evolution in what that really means, and what we now associate the term with is these more innovative, private, early-stage companies that have been enabled by a number of market factors to enter a traditionally quite difficult market. Investment in this space is exploding. So last year in 2014, we saw investment into financial services technology firms triple, and this is venture capital money going in. This year, moving into 2015, we saw a small slowdown in the amount of money going in, but we're seeing that as more of a maturity phase, as investors become more pragmatic and smarter with their money, as well as externalities in the broader macro conditions that are impacting a small slowdown in terms of fintech investment. What's interesting is what really drives these numbers. So, which was previously mentioned, is the kind of the fintech 1.0 wave, which was very much focused around payments, lending, etc., etc. And now what we're seeing is this new wave of technologies around personal financial management tools, robo-advisors, blockchain was mentioned. But what we're also starting to see is that fintech is moving away, not necessarily moving away, but fintech is focusing on different parts of the value chain that aren't necessarily customer focused. The easiest pieces of the chain to go after were the bits that touch the customer at first. And now we're starting to see more and more move into the capital market space, the back and middle office of the retail banks, of where fintechs are really starting to go after the bigger piece of the pie. What we also saw over the past few years was the majority of the fintechs coming through, and the ones getting investments, were termed disruptive. So over the 5 years ago, we would have spoken to some of the startups, and they would have said, well, we're going to change the name on the top of the building that we're looking at here and put our own startup name, which I think was more challenging than they originally expected. So a number of these startups that were deemed as disruptive, really struggled to get a huge amount of traction due to the complexities, the capital challenges around working in this industry. So what we've started to see over the past couple of years is the startup ecosystem has started to look at the banks and the existing industry as a source of opportunity. And the banks are also starting to look back as at these firms as a way in which they can look to reduce their cost base, drive the customer experience, or also access new revenue pools. So what are the factors that have contributed to this exponential growth in fintech firms across the globe, but maybe specifically in London as well? First of all, the cost to launch a technology startup has declined dramatically over the last 15 years, and particularly for a startup to enter the financial services sector, which would traditionally have a much higher barrier to entry, has also dramatically come down. Another thing is that technology adoption is ever increasing. If you look at the chart that's on screen here today, and you look at something like the telephone, which took approximately 100 years to get 95% penetration, versus something like the cell phone, which took a mere 15 years, you start to see how these changes are really starting to impact the ecosystem and really spurring on this growth of earlier stage companies that are able to access this market. We've also seen other industries evolve and reset the consumers, reset customer expectations. So if you look at retail, for example, the way in which that industry has evolved over the last 10 years has had a fundamental impact on what consumer expectations are, and they expect that level of service or customer experience or user experience, depending on the channel, to be uniform across all of their service providers, and that includes their bank as well. We've also seen a huge amount of talent be more attracted to the technology sector rather than the financial services sector. So maybe 10, 15 years ago, the most attractive place to go was a large investment bank or just into banking more generally. However, what we've seen is this massive influx of the top tier talent leaving universities heading for technology firms, not just the big ones, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Apples, but also this top talent looking at the smaller end of the spectrum as a source of opportunity. They're willing to discount their own immediate income for longer term gains put through into a company. So this is more of a general understanding of growing a business and what that might mean financially, but also personally rewarding. And the final piece, which is particularly relevant to London, is the regulatory environment. So we've seen a massive change, and this is not necessarily unique to London, from the regulator's perspective of innovation. So here in the UK, the FCA has a project called Project Innovate, and it is essentially a open door policy for startups to come and speak to the regulator about what they're doing. The regulator also here in the UK has the view that they like to let things happen organically before they stop. So they like to observe from a close proximity to see how things pan out, rather than stopping innovation straight away, taking 15 years to write the legislation about it and then implementing it. Here in the UK, they've got a unique perspective, although they tend to let things happen a little bit freely before they act. And I really think that's helped to spur what we see here in London is this fintech ecosystem that we've really created here. If you go somewhere like Japan, for instance, where the Japanese FCA has a very strict mentality, even when banks want to work with large technology companies, there's a number of challenges that face them, let alone to work with 10 guys sitting in the attic of an office building in East London. So a number of different factors have come together in London, but also other centers across Europe, particularly Paris, which was previously mentioned, but Stockholm, Frankfurt, Berlin, and then as far as Israel as well, where we're really starting to see these factors come together to spur on these these fintech clusters. So what are the banks doing about this? Well, the banks are actively starting to see fintech and fintech companies as a source of opportunity. However, the banks are very much still focused on their internal IT spending, which accounts for about 200 billion globally. Whereas if you compare that to what they are investing in the fintech ecosystem, which is slightly below $3 billion, it's a relatively small piece in comparison to what they're already spending on internal systems. So there's a large disconnect between the external ecosystem and how much money is going to that compared to what's going inside the bank walls. However, the banks have recognized this, And as I said, starting to look at these smaller companies as a source of opportunity to drive cost reduction priorities, enter new revenue pools, and moving on. Sorry. Okay. And why have banks? Oh, sorry. Skipping ahead. And why have banks been difficult? Why has it been difficult for them to innovate in the past? So we all know the complexities of the banking industry, and their technology architecture very much reflects that. Many of these banks are sitting on platforms that have been around for 30, 40, maybe even 50 years. And that makes it incredibly challenging to innovate. Culturally, they've been relatively risk adverse. The fear of failure because of the penalties inflicted upon them both from the regulators but also the reputational damage. There is a ever increasing application landscape in each of the large banks. The number of layers in which they operate on compared to that of a startup is just it's fundamentally different and non-comparable, which makes it again very difficult for them to manage. Because of all these three things, they're very much focused on run the bank activities rather than change the bank activities. Previously, and there's been some research on this, that a good amount of spend between CTB and RTB is about 50-50. But over the last few years, we've seen a shift, and we're seeing, in the banking industry, about 70% now is spent on run the bank activities rather than change the bank activities. And just moving that dial back to help the banks evolve is what they're looking for from FinTech as well. And of course, a lot of this is driven by the regulatory pressures. So never before has the banking industry been under such a regulatory burden as they are now. So dealing with these challenges has made it incredibly difficult for them to innovate themselves. So as I said, they're increasingly looking at the startup ecosystem as a source of opportunity, but the startup ecosystem is also looking at the banking industry as a source of opportunity. Startups have realized that it requires a lot of capital to enter the sector. It's very difficult and complex, and it's also incredibly challenging to acquire customers. Whereas the banks on the other side have seen, have the opposite problems. And I think both sides of the argument are now starting to look at each other and say, life together is better and collaboration is key. And we've seen that reflected in the companies in the FinTech ecosystem. We have seen a 10% increase in the amount of money, the proportionate increase in the amount of money going into collaborative FinTechs versus disruptives. So the amount of money going into disruptives is, as a proportion, declining, and there's one going into ones that are trying to collaborate with the industry is increasing. How are banks starting to interact with startups? Well, many of you know of all these incubators and accelerator programs that are really there to identify innovations in the market that may have be of interest to the particular financial institution. We started our FinTech Innovation Lab back in 2011 in New York. We opened the program in London the following year, and then we opened a program in APAC, in Hong Kong and Dublin in 2014. What's really interesting this year is the amount of money that's going into FinTech in Asia Pacific. That's where we see a real growth region with a 4x increase in investment this last year. So we're really expecting to see some big things come out of APAC in the next couple of years. Banks are also starting to carve out pieces of. Can you hear me? Banks are also starting to carve out pieces of their balance sheet to make investments into startups. So many of the individuals on the call will be well aware of Santander's $100 million fund headed up by Mario Blinky. I think he's made 13 investments now with this $100 million fund. And ever increasing, are we seeing more and more banks start to do this, carve up a little bit of their balance sheet to make strategic investments into startups. Not necessarily acquisitions, but investments just to open the door and build relationships with some of these early stage firms. So in summary, investment in FinTech continues to grow. it is, you know, a sizable increase, moving from 12.2 billion to 22.5 billion. And there's a huge increase in investment into the ecosystem. What we're seeing is the quality and quantity of fintech companies continues to increase, and a particular emphasis on the quality point. We've now got 24 fintech unicorns globally, but just generally the quality of those, even at a pre-Series A round, is significantly better, particularly in London. We've noticed that. For the incumbents or the banking industry, the attitude has moved very much from a risk from fintech, because fintechs are coming to eat their lunch, to an opportunity, back to this collaboration point. Banks are looking at these fintechs as the cost reduction and the new revenue pools. So what do we think is next? We are starting to see early signs that the fintech landscape is beginning to mature. Banks and investors are becoming more pragmatic about the companies they invest in. I think some of the easy money is leaving the sector because of some of the macro conditions. So what we're starting to see is kind of a maturity in the industry from an investment perspective. We also think we'll start to see a dropout of the bottom of the market. So some of the fintech startups of a lesser quality will start to struggle in this environment. We think fintechs are subject to the same rules that other startups are, that only 1 in 10 will survive. And in fact, we think that it will actually be a lower survival rate for fintech companies. And again, we think that we'll see more this trend continue, and more so of fintechs looking to cater to the banking industry rather than trying to disrupt it. So just a quick slide to illustrate what we think is going to happen. So pre-fintech, we think it was bank on bank, giant versus giant. We saw the startup emergence, and now what we're seeing today is partnerships, strategic minority investments, strategic majority investments, teaming agreements, all sorts of exercises to bridge the gap between the startups and the banks. But we still do think there'll be a few startups that grow and do compete directly with the banks as well. A perfect example of this is TransferWise. TransferWise's marketing campaign was very much focused around bad banks and hidden fees, and they really had an anti-bank campaign back in 2013. Whereas in 2015, they formally announced that they were in preliminary talks with joining the banking industry and moving to more of a collaborative model. Which just kind of illustrates this trend that we're seeing of disruptors moving to be more collaborative. So what gives us this unique perspective? Well, we run a FinTech Innovation Lab, which is an early stage accelerator program for financial services fintechs and also technology companies. As I said, we run the program in 4 locations across the globe. And the idea of the program is an intensive 12-week process that looks to bridge the gap between the two parties by providing coaching and mentoring from C-level executives across the banking industry. We have 49 financial institutions on the program globally, 16 full partners here in London, and they range from Barclays, HSBC, Goldman Sachs, Credit Suisse, Morgan Stanley. Most of the tier 1 players participate in our program here in London, as well as they do in their respective geographies across the globe. The program in London, we made a couple of changes to it this year. And what we previously across the globe, we've taken anywhere between 6 to 8 companies into our program. This year, we've taken 15. The way in which that works is we move through a 4-phase program, with phase 2 being the core part of the program. We go to market for applications in October time. We take those applications, we cut them down. We look for 15 companies to interview in each of our 3 streams. Those 3 streams are retail banking, technology for technologists, and investment banking and markets technology. From those 15 companies in each of the 3 streams we interview, we select 5 to join us in our physical lab for the 12-week program based in Canary Wharf, level 39 here in London. where we're sitting today. And then we were asked 6 of those companies to present on stage at Demo Day, which takes place on April 12th. Here are the 15 participants in this year's program. Just to highlight a couple, AimBrain, which is a behavioral biometrics company. So this is very much a technology for technologists. They have currently 3 modalities, which are behavioral, so how fast do you type, the pressure. They have voice recognition and face recognition as well. So really, you know, this is the next wave of authentication technology. In our retail stream, the one to highlight is PayKey, which is a payments capability that sits on top of any messaging service. So inside your WhatsApp, your Facebook Messenger, anything with a keyboard, they enable the bank to exist in that messenger service. A really interesting piece of technology. And then Crowdora, which are enabling banks to do security issuance on the blockchain, and that they're a really interesting company in our corporate and IB stream. Let's get over this one. I think that's it from me, and I suppose I'll end there and let the moderators hand over for Q&A.
Thank you for that, James. Okay, so now we're into the question and answer session. Just a reminder again to all our participants, on the right-hand side of your screen is a webinar control panel. There's a little box that says questions. If you click the little plus sign where it says questions, that'll maximize. And if you write in your questions there, we'll see them on our screen and we can answer them. So what we're going to do now is just for about 30 seconds is mute ourselves so we can see the questions that have already come in. But please do continue to write in your questions. Now's your chance. Okay, the first question I can see that's just come in, I think it's addressed to Stéphane. We said that France is in the top 3, and the questioner just wanted to know a bit of clarity on that. The top 3 of what exactly?
I'm sorry, there's a typo in the presentation. France being in the top 3 is a wish. It was a conviction, and it's not. Of course, it's not the case as of today. We are more in the top 5, I would say. It depends on what other KPI you take to rank the locations. But it depends on the number of creation of fintech, or the investment, the global amount of investment. So I'm sorry, it's a typo. It's a wish. It's a bet for us to say that France could be in the top 3 in the next couple of years. Sorry about that.
Thank you for that. And we mentioned, there's a question, I'm just going to read it out now. It says, a very interesting description about both French and UK ecosystems, but so far no examples of cooperation between the two. Can the UK and French fintech help each other?
Well, so the collaboration between fintech and financial institutions is a key and tricky topic, and we had a workshop on Fintech Connect in London in December on that topic. It's not so easy because the collaboration is based on, of course, the same objective, but the way fintech work is quite different comparing to the way that bank work, especially when you look at the ability to deliver IT program. So that's why we, Chapuis, try to help the fintech and the banks to collaborate by implementing new way of collaborative work, like lean startup, or creating an internal incubator for the fintech, or also to help the fintech to one of the key pain points. I don't know what you think about that, James, but for the fintech is to go through the procurement process of the banks. It's very, very, very long and very painful. For example, as I said, we are currently mentoring a fintech of travel, and they signed a proof of concept with Rabobank. It took something like 6 months to go through the procurement process, and I think it's more about 9 months for Lloyds. So it's very, very difficult. So you have different. I'm not sure I answered the question, but I just wanted to start it by an introduction and say that the collaboration is obvious, as explained by James. It's a win-win game for the two, FI and fintech, but there is a lot of hurdles. And but still, we have some example in France. For example, I said Crédit Mutuel Arkea is quite good in taking the part of the capital from innovative fintech, like we mentioned Litchi. So it's a way of collaboration. The second one is to create incubators. So BNP Paribas is clearly involved in that stream by with the creation of L'Atelier. L'Atelier is quite a dynamic incubator for fintech. So yes, there is a trend.
Yeah, I would say it's relatively early stage. So I would say the majority of the way in which the two sides have been collaborating so far is that a lot of the French banks are coming over to London to take learnings from, and not just the banks, but maybe the regulator, the government as well, coming to London to take some of the learnings back to France. And we've seen that, like, SocGen is a partner on our fintech program here in London. We run workshops with Credit Agricole to help them understand what's going on in the London ecosystem and specific some companies to take it back. But what we're starting to see the emergence of is, as more and more fintechs pop up in France, is the other way. So the UK looking at the French ecosystem as another pool of talented innovators to tap into for whatever the objective may be. So I think for the most part it is it's more one way at the moment, but I expect that to change as the French ecosystem develops.
Okay, thank you for that, James. I'm going to read out the next question. How do banks in France differ from banks in the UK when approaching fintech/innovation?
I would say it depends on the bank. I'm sorry about that. I think some banks are very willing to embrace the new innovation. I would say Crédit Mutuel and BNP Paribas are clearly in the leading pack, but still I think one of the key burden for the French bank is the ability to design and to implement a big IT transformation program. And when I say big, it's not only a question of amount; it's also a question of disruption. So we had a lot of discussion with IT department in France, and when you talk about big data or machine learning or this kind of new front end or back end solution, there is a clear pushback. So I think for French bank there is a legacy in terms of ability to change the IT framework, and they have to tackle this issue first. But in a way, they are very willing to embrace and to integrate innovation. I would say so to conclude that probably Crédit Mutuel and BNP Paribas are in the impact. I would not say that for SocGen. I don't know what you think, but when you look some declaration from Christophe Mernet, for example, head of CIB, say the fintech is the enemy or this kind of thing, it's not a good sign for the innovation. So it depends. My answer would be it depends on the bank. The level of maturity is quite different depending on the banks. And of course, I would say comparing to the UK bank, I think which are better in changing the structure and the way of they work. They have to tackle this issue, be able to transform themselves first.
I would just echo those points. You know, in the UK, you can't treat every bank the same. You know, you have some banks that expose themselves externally. So, for example, if you look at Barclays and some of the activity that they do, running their own lab, they very much have almost an open door to startups because that's what they want to do. Whereas here in the UK, we have some more conservative players as well, similar to many of the French banks that, you know, are slightly further back in that spectrum of thinking, perhaps. But you know, I think it will change. They'll have to.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question that's come in
Stefan.
for Stefan particularly. I would like to know if there is crowdfunding platform specialized in fintech.
Crowdfunding platform specialized in fintech. You mean for finance and fintech? Like we are for the SMEs or? Well, it's a good question.
Why would you have a different platform for a specific fintech? I don't think there is one because I can't think of a reason why it would make sense. Maybe industry. Not that I know of.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't see any specific. And as Jen said, I don't see the rationale to have a specific cluster for the fintech or platform for the fintech. Maybe it exists, but no, I don't see any example right now. Sorry.
Okay, thank you for that. The further question is, do you have an idea of the amount of UT fintech services being exported to France?
To France, so from France to the UK or the US?
From the UK to France.
Yeah, I agree with you, James. A very small amount, unfortunately, I think. As explained by James previously, I think London is still a very an incredible ecosystem to develop the fintech in terms of benchmark, mentoring, financing. So the challenge for France is more to retain the talent rather than to organize the coming back of the talents for the moment. Just to let you know, in the CES in Las Vegas, the French community was the second, just behind not just behind, but behind the US community. But maybe 80% of those guys were outside of France. So I think first let's retain our talents, and then we will think of the coming back of the other. And that's I don't know what you think about that, but when you look at the growth of Tel Aviv, for example, that's a clear trend. People are coming back in Israel to develop the fintech, mainly around the cyber security. But it's due to other criteria, political criteria. But for France, it's not the case.
If you look at it from the startups perspective, we're talking about early stage companies. So most of them have, were incorporated here in next market after the UK. You're most going to go after the US, or before you go after a continental European market. So it's just, I think it's again echoing the point. It's relatively small.
Yeah, but there is opportunity to bring fintech. Could be French, could be English, or could be American fintech in France, because France is still an interesting market. For example, I mean, I told you that before this webinar, but I had a lunch with the CEO of Flute. Flute is a front office application. It's like a bank for students, and they're interested in entry strategy on the French market, because there is a room for that, because the financial inclusion of the students in France is too low comparing to the other segments of the population. So there is room for attracting fintech, but not especially French, because the French market could be interesting for fintech like Loot or other.
Okay, another question I can see that's come in is asking about big tech, and in brackets GAFA, G-A-F-A. So what about innovation with big tech, in brackets GAFA?
So, I mean, of course, these are the most innovative players. The banks are grappling with, and fintechs are grappling with Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, taking more and more of the customer mind share. You know, they own the customer relationship. So for a fintech or a bank, so as a bank you're looking to retain or grow that mind share, as a fintech you're trying to enter that space. It's incredibly difficult. And those the GAFA are very, very good at innovating and, you know, moving forward, because they don't have the same legacy that the big banks do, and they also have the advantages that the startups don't have, which is the capital and the talent and that. So the GAFAs are the big threat. They are the ones that are sitting on the peripheral of the financial services ecosystem, and they're the ones that can move quite quickly and be very, very disruptive.
Okay, thank you for that answer. This is going to be our last question now. We have had quite a few come in, and we've run slightly over time, but we're going to keep a record of all the questions that have been asked. I'm going to read out the last question. Refer to robot advisors. There are several in the UK, in the USA, and in France. Will robots replace banks? Will robots be bought by banks? And will robots die? That's the question. They do say it is a difficult question, and there's no 100% clear answer now, but they'd be interested in listening to the arguments about robot advisors and their interaction with banks.
So this is, you know, I don't like to make forecasts because you're never right. This is an interesting one. So robots and robo-advisors are very different things. Banks are buying robots, software robots, like crazy. So let's park that one. That's definitely something the banks are adopting at the moment. Robo-advisors, that's an interesting one. So I'm not necessarily sold on the idea that the traditional wealth management model is going to move to a robo-advisory model. I think what robo-advisory does is maybe opens up a new, small customer segment, but I don't think it's big, because what you're talking about is a gap between, you know, maybe somebody who wants to invest between 10 and 50, because over that point you're catered for by a traditional relationship manager, and you value that relationship, and then below that you don't have enough asset or wealth to invest into these platforms. So I think it's yet to be seen, and I also think the wealth managers are very good at offering their own platforms to their customers already, and they're moving quite quickly in this space. So I think there's a number of different dynamics at play, and I don't want to put a marker on any scenario moving forward. Really.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's probably a solution for some segments, some client segments, and mainly for what we call the low-touch client, because you can replace some stuff by a robot and deliver some savings, which is a key objective for all the banks in the world. But for high-value clients, I think they still need a physical relation and a tailor-made service. So robot advisors are very trendy, but I'm not sure it's gonna be it's gonna have a big impact in the client relation between banks and the client. It's gonna be a game changer for some segment, but it's not gonna be huge. I don't think so. But it's interesting. It's an interesting technology. So we have been very happy with James to answer your question. I think you can forward all the questions, and we'll be very happy to answer by mail or by phone, or I don't know. It was a pleasure.
Yep.
Pleasure to meet you, James.
Pleasure to meet you as well.
Hope you enjoyed this webinar, and it was a good experience for us. So hope you share this experience.
Thank you, Stéphane. Thank you, James. So we've come to the end of the question and answer session now. We do have a record of all the questions that have come in. If we haven't had time to cover your question, we're sorry about that. We do have a record of it along with your email address, so we'll be able to follow that up. Do we have any last words to say before we wrap up?
This is Sophie speaking. I would like to thank you all the attendees, and I'd like to give a big thank you to our speakers of today. We're looking at organizing another session on FinTech within the next 6 months, so watch out, you will receive an invitation. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you have my contact details on the presentation on the trade side for the British companies interested in the French market, and for the French companies interested in the British market, do not hesitate to contact Norina. Norina?
Yes, please feel free to contact me if you would like to set up a business or expand in the UK. Thank you so much.
So just a reminder again, you'll receive an email with a copy of this presentation and the audio within the next couple of days. So you'll have that with our contact details to follow up with us if you have any questions and to review all the information at your leisure. So on behalf of us here in Paris and of the presenters, just thank you for attending. When you log out of the webinar, you'll receive a very short summary, very short survey. We would appreciate your feedback just to let us know what worked well, what worked less well, and what we can improve in the future. So on behalf of our presenters, thank you for attending and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you.